And when you look at the story of Jesus' encounter with Pilate in John 18, Pilate asks him the most important question he could have ever asked. He said, "What is truth?" and walked away. Imagine that. Imagine that. Standing in front of him who claimed to be the way, the truth, and the life. And Jesus had said to him, "They that are on the side of truth, listen to me." And so to you this afternoon, I want to present a message within the time that I have allocated here. And the message is, why do I believe Jesus Christ to be the way, the truth, and the life? I have written a lot on the subject. I've written a book on this called Jesus Among Other Gods. I've written one called Why Jesus. None of that material am I bringing to you here today. I'm just taking some existentially relevant ideas that I hope will form the impetus within your life to carry this message everywhere you go. You see, truth is generally measured, tell us the philosophers, in three ways: logical consistency, empirical adequacy, and experiential relevance. Is what you are saying logically consistent? Is it empirically verifiable? Is it experientially relevant? So there's consistency, verifiability, and relevance. May I just take the third of these on the relevance of the message of Jesus and talk to you a little bit about it. Number one is his description of the human condition. No one describes your heart and my heart more accurately than the person of Jesus Christ. You know, yesterday I was talking to a young woman who comes from a completely different faith, from a different part of this world. And as she was talking to me, she said to me, "I never believed in God because of my faith in the icon that I believed in before." She said, "Now, all of a sudden, in following Jesus Christ, I have seen my heart in a way I have never seen it before." It was in the 1980s, during the Cold War, that I had been invited to Warsaw, Poland. It was grim, it was cloudy, it was cold, the Soviet presence already there, very much so, in the early 80s. And I was taken to another city where I was speaking to the Polish gathering. And one day, a man by the medical doctor said to me, "Ravi, have you ever been to Auschwitz?" I said to him, "Yes, I've been to some concentration camps, Buchenwald and Dachau." He said, No. This is a death camp. Have you ever been to a death camp? I said, "I don't think so." He said, "Let me take you there." So we drove. Emotionally, I was totally unprepared for what I was going to see. Totally unprepared. Because Buchenwald, Dachau, and all, as much as they show you something, doesn't show you what Auschwitz does. And as I walked in there, from room to room, the only response is pin drop silence. You see the pictures of young boys that had been castrated by Mengele, standing there as twins photographed like this, with skeletons and their skin tied taut around them, vacant, empty eyes. And you look at what the most educated generation then did to humanity. In one room, there was 14,000 pounds of women's hair stashed behind glass. When the women were taken into the gas ovens, they were stripped of their hair, which was then put into sacks and sold in the marketplace to make money out of all of this. 14,000 pounds of that hair still remained behind glass. They were being exterminated in Auschwitz at the rate of 12,000 every day. They'd be stripped naked and taken into the gas oven, gas rooms, which they were told were actually their showers. And they'd be so tightly packed against each other, flesh to flesh, already just skin and bones. And they would not know what was coming. They were told they were going to get their first shower, and all this while, shaven bald, standing shoulder to shoulder, and the spigots would be turned on. and the gas would start to descend, and somebody would scream, "Gas!" Another 12,000 shoveled out of there. And I remember walking out of there thinking to myself, this is what we are capable of, even listening to the best music under the world and going to the highest educational systems. But I missed something in that. You see, ladies and gentlemen, the problem of evil is not so much that it's so pervasive and so strong out there, but the fact that it is deep inside your heart and mine too. Viktor Frankl, who served twice in Auschwitz as a prisoner, says this: if we present man with a concept of man which is not true, we may well corrupt him. When we present him as an automaton of human reflexes, as a mind machine, as a bundle of instincts, as a pawn of drives and reactions, as a mere product of heredity and environment, we will feed the nihilism to which he is already prone. I became acquainted with the last stage of corruption in my second concentration camp, Auschwitz. The gas chambers of Auschwitz were the ultimate consequence of the theory that man is nothing but the product of heredity and environment, or as the Nazis like to say, of blood and soil. Listen to this statement now. I'm absolutely convinced that the gas chambers of Auschwitz, Treblinka, and Majdanek were ultimately prepared not in some ministry or other in Berlin, but rather at the desks and lecture halls of nihilistic scientists and philosophers. Not behind the Ministry of Defense in Berlin, but at the desks and the lecture halls of nihilistic scientists and philosophers. The theory of relativism today is being presented in the highest institutes of our learning, producing a whole generation of young men and women who no longer believe that there are absolutes. That's where it's happening. The early stages of corruption may be behind lecterns. The end stages is the devaluation, the dehumanization, the denigration, and ultimately the desensitization of your conscience and mind. One of my great heroes was a man called Malcolm Muggeridge. In the early days of my conversion, I started to read Muggeridge because he was a brilliant user of language in a way I had never read anybody else. Muggeridge himself was a latecomer to Jesus Christ, possibly the greatest British journalist of the 20th century, a toss-up between him and G.K. Chesterton, both of them who ended up becoming moralist philosophers. I had the privilege of being with Muggeridge just 9 months before he died at his home in England and spending one of the finest afternoons I'd ever spent in my life as he talked of his younger days and his own wanderings, and we talked about the incident I'm now going to mention to you. When he was a young professor of journalism in India, he loved the Indian people. He stepped out of his quarters one morning and went into the river to swim. And as he was swimming at dawn, way out in the distance, he saw the silhouetted figure of a woman getting into the river far away from him. And he was a lustful type of individual. He decided he would make a go for her. Started to swim in her direction, and he said in his heart there was a voice telling him, no, don't, no, don't. But he said, I smothered that voice and swam as hard as I could in her direction. And as I came closer and closer, the woman herself, of course, probably by this point, stunned that someone was invading her privacy, especially as she saw a white man emerge from the waters. And as he shook the water off his face, all he could see was a woman covering herself like that. And he said, I was shocked that I was looking into the face and the body of a woman with leprosy. Her fingers were gone. Her nostrils were gone. Her lips were gone. Her eyes looked almost like a gargoyle peering out of a wall somewhere. And Muggeridge said, I was on the verge of saying, what a horrible, ugly woman. Till he said, I paused and realized, no, I've got this wrong. It wasn't a horrible, ugly woman. It was this horrible, ugly heart with which I was living. Take the whole issue of pornography today. making its billions with supposedly the most beautiful human beings on the face of the earth, stirring up within you the ugliest passions you can ever have. Passions that no human being can ever fulfill. No human being can ever fulfill, because it takes away the possibility of the impact of a person and puts in its place a feeling, a desire as the supreme pursuit to which you go, which no person can ultimately satisfy. That's what the Bible talks about. Lust of the flesh, lust of the eyes, pride of life. Jesus describes your heart and mine perfectly when he says the heart is sinful and desperately wicked above all things. Do you know when the philosopher Nietzsche in 1900, before he died at the age of 54, said God is dead in the 19th century, and then he went on to say a universal madness will break out in the 20th century, and the 20th century will become the bloodiest century in history. He made the pronouncement, both of which took place. He took the first step, and the last 13 years of his life he spent insane. And in the 20th century, we killed more people on the battlefield than the previous 19 put together, and the weapons of warfare are piling up. Take a look at your heart. You know why? On the day you see your heart as desperately wicked in need of a Savior, you could become an answer rather than just another question. The description of my condition, the provision for my malady. This is the only answer in the world that offers you a Savior. The only answer in the world that offers you a Savior. Some years ago, I had the privilege of speaking at the United Nations prayer breakfast. They asked me to speak on the search for absolutes in a relativistic culture. Now, that's a tough subject for anywhere, and especially in the early hours of the morning, at just about before breakfast, to speak to people from so many countries and walk very cautiously. It was a toughie. You can't come in your face. You have to take about 16 minutes or so, 15 minutes to talk in terms of general understanding, and the last 2 to 3 minutes bring an answer from the Christian perspective. So I said this to them. I said, there are 4 areas in which you look for absolutes: evil, justice, love, and forgiveness. Evil, justice, love, and forgiveness. I said, you talk about evil empires when you get together here. What do you mean by that? You look for just society. What do you mean by justice? You leave your loved ones back home and you are here and you miss them. You know what love is all about, especially when you miss your loved ones so much. And then some of you are gonna blow it, you'll make mistakes, and you'll want to be forgiven. Evil, justice, love, and forgiveness. They were listening at the edge of their seats. I said, I have just 2 or 3 minutes left. I want to ask you this question. Where in the world did these 4 converge at a moment in history? Where did evil, justice, love, and forgiveness converge at a moment in history? I said, can I take you to a hill called Calvary and show you the person of Jesus Christ, who shows you the evil in your heart and mine, who was just and the justifier, who loved us so greatly to give himself for us, and who said, Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they are doing. The person of Jesus Christ. You know what? When I finished that talk, as the ambassadors lined up, one of the ambassadors came to me and he said, Mr. Zacharias, I come from an atheistic country. I don't want to be here. My president commanded that I come here. And every day I wake up and I wonder, what am I doing here? Why am I here? He said, today I have found my answer. I came here to find God and to find Jesus Christ in my life. One more simple illustration. Years ago, I had the privilege of being at a gathering in Ramallah, Jerusalem, talking to one of the 4 founders of Hamas. I was taken by some friends, and he was agitated. He'd served years in prison, solidly built guy. He'd lost several of his children, and at the end of it, One of the leader of our group asked if each one of us 5 had a question for him. Because it was a private meeting, I won't tell you what my question was, and nor will I tell you his answer. But when he finished answering, I looked at him and I said, Sheikh, I don't like your answer. I really don't like your answer. I said, but let me tell you something, and you and I may never see each other again, not far from where you and I are sitting.